Good morning, afternoon or evening, wherever and whenever you are. Welcome back to Tiny Table Talks with me, Rob, my good friends Claire and Sam, and also Simon. A lot has happened since the last episode. We've all made some hardware upgrades, euphemism intended, and our listener base has exploded from 0 to a whopping 15 people. So I would like to take this opportunity to personally thank all of our listeners now. So thank you to Claire's dad and those of our friends who have had their arms twisted. We've got some great games to discuss today, another topic designed to make sure that we all disagree. So grab a drink, stick your feet up, and enjoy. So the topic, which is designed to cause as much disagreement as possible this week, is basically what we feel is our most and least replayable games. Now, just to give us a little bit of an introduction to this, I picked this question without giving it a great deal of thought, really, but then realised actually this is an incredibly difficult topic to actually explore, because obviously most replayable is pretty easy because it's a game you've played a lot, but least replayable by definition means that you haven't played it all that much, which means you probably don't know all much about the game. So I'm very, very interested to hear what we've all come up with. Claire, tell us about your most and your least replayable games.
Okay, my most replayable game is Scythe. So it's a game that's set in 1920s Europe, and the objective of the game is different every time, which makes it very difficult for me to explain concisely right now. In short, players take 2 actions per turn to build the biggest and best empire they possibly can. The point of these is to do some of the many things that can be done to earn points, such as ingratiate yourself with the local populace, have a certain amount of power, or build buildings. And even though I forget the rules every time I play, and until yesterday I believed that the whole game was set in Russia, this is the game that I think is the most replayable, because every time I finish playing it, I immediately want to play it again. I find it extremely hard to justify what it is about Scythe that makes it so addictive, but then I'm not sure what makes heroin addictive either, and I'm still prepared to believe that it is.
I totally agree with you, Claire. I really, really enjoyed Scythe when I played it. I think there's a really it's a lovely mechanic not being able to lose units. You know, you can throw units into really awkward situations because you need an objective and not have to worry about it massively impacting upon your sort of overall strategy, because they just get sent back to home base and then you can just redeploy them, which is enough of a...
It is a pain.
It is a pain, yeah, because moving troops it's quite time consuming, but it's I think it promotes more exciting gameplay because people are more willing to throw stuff at each other and then not have to worry about so much the consequences.
The thing is, I know that I love Scythe and I find it really replayable and really addictive. But I also know that you guys on the podcast don't necessarily agree with me because of the number of times I've been told that we can't play it because it was the last game we played and everyone wants a change. If I had my way, we'd be playing it all the time.
I play it and I enjoy playing it, but I wouldn't buy it. I think that's probably the best way I can describe it.
I'm quite a fan of Scythe. I think it's good fun. I particularly like the player boards with the little cutout areas where the wooden blocks and stuff. And there's something really, really nice about that. They've made it so tactile, that game. It's
very satisfying.
Agreed.
And I think it'd be rude not to mention when you're talking about Scythe how beautiful it is as a board game. And I know that this isn't something that everyone gets excited by, but the artwork and the style and the miniatures and the little bits of wood and iron and all the resources are all really nice and satisfying little miniatures that come with the box. And you can enjoy it with, I think the base game is 2 to 5 players, which is quite a diverse number. Like being able to play it as a 2-player game, although very different to being, with 5 people, it's still fun, is quite a challenge. I think a lot of games that I own, at least, kind of need 3 people as a minimum, and when they are a big scary looking board game that takes up more than Rob's table.
Well, hang on, that's every, like Solitaire takes up more than Rob's table.
You just need to learn to be more versatile, mate. Like, my table isn't just one table, it's the table and then also the console table next to it. You can use the sofa seats. You're just not being creative enough.
You do get a cardio workout when you play a game at Rob's house, because you're forever walking from one side of the room to the other, but just to look at your game board.
Sure, you do have to go upstairs to discard your card.
Yeah. Claire, tell us about your least replayable game.
For my least replayable game, I'd like to nominate Dirty Minds. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's absolutely hilarious. And it's won by the player that is best at solving riddles, which sound like they're rude, but actually they aren't. So the more that your mind gets sidetracked by the innuendo you've heard, the less competitive you are at solving the riddle. Each time you get a puzzle right, you keep the card it was written on, and they have letters on the back. And the first person to be able to spell the word dirty with their letters wins. I was great at this game when I was 11, but pretty poor by 21, which I think tells you all you need to know about how effective it is.
I'm concerned that you were playing this game as an 11-year-old.
It does explain a lot, though.
Yeah.
It's outrageous.
So why is it not replayable?
Yeah, so the reason it's not replayable is that once you've had puzzles once, you know them for the next time. So you can't be caught out by it. And even if the owner of the game plays with a different group of friends, they would then still have an unfair advantage. So you could play it and then wait 10 years, wait until you've forgotten it all, and then play it again. But really, I don't think that merits it having space on your board game rack. Although I have got a few puzzles for you guys if you're up for it.
Oh, do, go on.
Oh, yeah, go on him.
Okay. I start with a V, and every woman has one. She can use me to get what she wants. What am I?
I'm so terrible at games like this.
I mean, I've got an answer. I just don't think... It's just an answer I know I'll have to edit out.
I mean, I think we've all got that answer, but that is the objective of the game, I'm guessing.
What's the answer? Go on.
The correct answer is voice.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
You feel silly now.
Okay.
Okay, so now you've got the hang of it. I'll give you another one. I've got 3 in total. So this is a 4-letter word. It begins with F and it ends with K. And if you can't get one, you can use your hands instead. But they
It's a
may
fork.
get... It is a fork!
Yes.
Well done. Well done. Okay, last one. All men have one, but it is longer on some than on others. The Pope never uses his, and a man gives it to his wife once they're married.
His surname?
It is a surname.
Boom.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you, Claire. I'm going to move us on. Sam, give us your least and most replayable games.
Okay, so my most replayable game is a game called Munchkins, which I think a lot of people around this table have played. Around this table, we're not in table, we're miles apart. But
Virtual
anyway.
table.
Virtual table, exactly. Not Rob's table, obviously. It's further apart than that.
We couldn't socially distance around that.
No, you couldn't. You couldn't distance around that. It would be, what's the word? Illegal, I think. Anyway.
That was the most flat pat joke I've ever heard in my life. Here are the bits. Put it together yourself.
Pretty much. I assume that's what's happened with your table. You put it in a Tesco carrier bag and took it home.
Oh, just get on with it. Get on.
Tell us about Munchkins.
So Munchkins is a card management game where you have to kill monsters and gain kit and gain clothing and items and things like that to try and get yourself to 10 victory points and beat the other people that you're playing with. And the thing I like the most about it, I think it makes you want to play it again and again, is that it is just it's sort of endlessly funny. Every time you play it, you get this sort of new combination of things and this new combination of events that come up with your friends trying to screw you over or you screwing your friends over, and it's endlessly entertaining. You find yourself laughing a lot to the point that when you've got to your 10 victory points and the game's ended, you immediately want to play again. I think that's a really good feature. A lot of the monsters in Munchkins have very funny names, and it means that you often find yourself saying truly ridiculous sentences. Something like, okay, I'm going to attack this snotty nose with my pokey poo stick. And things like that just will make you laugh forever. And they make you want to see what other random combinations come up after that.
I think one of the things that makes it replayable for me as well is the fact that everyone loves it. So no matter who's coming over or what weekend away you have planned, you know that the audience will like it.
I would like to second that as well. Actually, my wife has played this, and just to give you some context, my wife doesn't like any board games much beyond Double. Now, if you've ever played Double, I'm sincerely apologise on behalf of board games in general. Basically, it's adult Snap, and it is just the worst game in the world.
Is it even adult Snap, or is it just colourful Snap? Adults a bit strong.
I have played it successfully with a 4-year-old, which I think just shows.
That sums Double up quite considerably, isn't it?
So yeah, I totally agree. So I think it's a really good gateway game, and you know, my wife thoroughly enjoyed it. We all thoroughly enjoyed it, despite the fact we obviously have very different interests when it comes to board games.
It's the game that I've played that does the best job of putting a smile on my face.
I do particularly enjoy the fact that although everyone's kind of out for themselves to try and win, there does come a point where someone might be, 1 or 2 tiers away from winning, and the whole table just goes, right, well, how can we screw this person over and send them as far back down the ladder as possible?
Yeah.
So there is a mechanic in this game, which is that you draw monsters out of a deck, and they get played on the table. And if you don't draw a monster on your first take of a card, you then get to take another card from that deck, and it goes into your hand. Now, the fun thing about that, of course, is that means you've got a monster that you can play on other people whenever you want to. And for the first 8 victory points, going to 10 to win, nobody claims to have any, nothing happens. And then somebody will get to 9, just about to win, and then the table will erupt with this sea of monsters that will appear on this one player, who will get absolutely decimated. And it's hilarious fun.
I really think you want to be the second person to approach the finish line, because you really want everyone to use up that ammunition on the first person. And it's a really odd dynamic, because I don't think I've ever played a game before where the strategic ideal was to be in second.
You do have a good selection of games. Different things happen every time you play. We played a game a little while ago with a few friends of ours, and I got to 9 points, was absolutely torn apart by everyone around the table, knocked back down to 0 or 1 point with no items, no nothing. And then the other 2 players spent the whole time infighting, which meant that I then had the chance to go from 1 point all the way back up to 9 points. And then everyone else has spent all their cards on screwing each other over, and then I still won. And the look on the 3 people's faces when you go from nearly winning back to no points, back to winning again, is the sort of thing I wish I'd have taken a photo of.
The greatest part about Munchkins is it's so light-hearted that you can have a massive swing like that, and those other 3 people won't be annoyed that they lost. They'll go, oh my god, that was brilliant. And if you said, right, let's do another one, they'll be like, yeah, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, there'll be no table flipping.
I think it does define replayability.
Yeah. How long is an average game?
About 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, I would say 45 minutes.
So it's a pretty reasonable period of time as well, isn't it? Sam, tell us about your least replayable game, mate.
So my least replayable game is a game called Escape from Colditz. Now, this is going to be an interesting one. We've got a friend of ours called Matt, who introduced us to this game and loves this game, will be listening to this and absolutely seething.
That'll be our first 1-star review.
I really enjoyed the first time we played this. So if anybody hasn't played it, most people listening probably haven't. It's not. I don't think it's got the sort of wide-ranged playership of a Monopoly or a Risk or something. You are effectively playing. Most of you are playing Prisoner of War, trying to get out of Colditz. And then one player is playing the German guards, holding them all hostage. And they have to go around collecting items and trying to break out of Colditz. And it's very good fun the first time round, but it just didn't leave me wanting to play it again. I enjoyed it once. I think the only time I would play it again, I wouldn't mind playing it again as the Germans. I think that would be a different dynamic to it. But for some reason, and I can't really put my finger on why, I've got very little interest in playing it again as a Prisoner of War.
Yeah, I know what you mean with that. I had a wicked time playing it, particularly as well. This is probably something you tried to forget, but Sam had managed to play an absolutely fantastic piece of play where he managed to get his Prisoner of War out onto a ledge that he could then abseil down off that ledge and then escape, but then realised just as he was about to abseil down off this roof that he forgot to bring any rope, which was just one of the most beautiful moments in board gaming history as far as I'm concerned.
I'll second that.
It was entertaining, to watch Sam's dude impotently stand on the ledge, unable to retreat back into the room and unable to get down onto the floor.
And effectively out of action for the whole game.
Matt, who was playing as the guards, didn't even bother arresting him, just left him out on that ledge for the entire game.
I'd forgotten about that.
Claire, you bought this game, right?
I bought it as a present for my dad, who did love it, and admittedly has only played it once, but I think that's largely down to him not having a group of people to play board games with regularly. One of the things I really noticed playing with a family group versus a regular board game group is that they were so much kinder to each other. They were so much more willing to swap each other the items that they need to escape. Whereas when I play with you guys, you're much less inclined to see each other win. And I think this is something that characterises every game of Colditz. If you're playing a faction of a Prisoner of War, there comes a point in the game, if you think you're not going to win, where you have to decide whether to support the Nazis and not trade your piece of rope with Sam, who's stuck on a ledge, but could win if he got it, or support another faction of Prisoners of War and make trades that are not advantageous to you, but at least see the Nazis being beaten.
Potentially to give everyone in our board games group an insight as to exactly how the minds of the people that I call friends work. Given the choice of supporting the Nazis or helping me, they all chose the Nazis.
Fantastic. So, Si, go on, give us your most replayable and least replayable games.
So my most replayed game, or most replayability game, is a PlayStation, Xbox, PC game called Destiny. So Destiny and its sequel are both first-person shooters that kind of incorporate a light role-playing element and are also a sort of massively multiplayer online game. So what you do is you assume the role of a guardian, and you're the protector of Earth's last city, and you have to protect it from a load of different alien races that are trying to see the end of humanity. It's a very kind of interesting mix of sci-fi and fantasy, which I think is quite original. But the reason that it's so replayable is that the gameplay is just really top tier. It just feels really fun to play. They've just absolutely nailed that core feeling of shooting your gun, using the kind of powers and abilities that the game gives you, and working together in conjunction with other people. It was pretty much the kind of first console game that went for this kind of hybrid approach. And for me, I still think that despite there being many kind of imitators that have come up to try and ape that success, I don't think any of them have managed to beat Destiny at that kind of core gameplay field.
I've not played it really. I played it briefly when I was around your place, probably a number of years ago now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, it seemed like an excellent game. It was certainly very smooth. I really liked the way as well that I felt quite isolated for some of it, but then you go to a certain area and you click a button or you initiate a quest, and then suddenly just people from everywhere just all descend on you all at once, and you end up fighting this massive boss, and it's really exciting. Not knowing how this game works, having not played it, once you've sort of done the narrative and done the storyline, do you not hit a glass ceiling, as it were, sort of where almost you've done it and you can't do any more?
No, so that's where the multiplayer online or MMO kind of features come in. And for me at least, they very cleverly designed the game so that it puts kind of little hooks in you and says, okay, well, here's a repeatable quest. You can go and kill a few aliens. And if you do that, then you might get, a new gun drop or a new piece of armor. And so that's where the kind of role-playing element of it comes in, that you get new world drops, you get new weapons, you get new things, and there's always something to go and chase. I think for me as well, the breadth of different things you can do in the game keeps it really fresh. So you can go and cruise around on one of the kind of different areas and patrol and fight bosses in the world. There are preset dungeons or strike missions that you can go on, and it will matchmake you with people that have their own sort of reward and their own set of quests linked to it. There's a multiplayer kind of player versus player part, so you can just play a kind of deathmatch or a capture the flag or that kind of thing against other people. So whatever you're kind of feeling, you can log on, you can pick up some of these quests or these bounties, you can go and do whatever mode you think is the most fun or whatever will progress you towards the next new exotic gun or new piece of armor, and you can log off at the end of the night and feel like you've made an accomplishment towards something.
To what degree is it sort of, if you do all the right quests and you get all the right armor and you get all the right weapons, can that make you the best player, or is there an element of skill as well?
There's definitely an element of skill, and what they do is they've kind of kept that top tier challenge in kind of the top tier activities, and the smartest part they do is that they lock some of the best stuff behind those activities. So and the reason I think that's a good thing is that you can load into one of the social hubs, you can see someone with a particular gun or a particular title above their head or a particular piece of armor, and automatically, oh, they've gone and they've done that really complicated raid, or they've managed to play that really competitive PvP mode and win. And I think that on top of getting a gun or a piece of armor or whatever that feels unique and is really powerful, you also get that feeling of like, well, people can see what I've achieved and people appreciate that.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so your least replayable game,
So I took a look at my board game shelf and I just looked at the game that I think we've played the least and that I've had for the longest amount of time. It's called XCOM the board game, and it's a cooperative game, which I know Sam will love, in which a team of up to 4 players is tasked with defending Earth against an alien invasion. So it's quite a easy kind of theme for people to understand. You can say, like, we're playing as the government response or the United Nations response of how we're going to stop an alien invasion. Now, this is actually based on a strategy PC game, which I've played a lot of. And so that was kind of the thing that piqued my interest, because I could kind of see how, if you've got this interesting turn-based strategy game on your PC, I kind of thought, yeah, I can see how you could translate that into a board game. You could make it into like a dungeon crawling type game similar to Gloomhaven, where you might have maps and then you have to move your soldiers around and fight the aliens, and you could have done something like that. The other aspect of the PC game is then you have like a kind of worldview where you have to manage the panic levels in different countries and how much research you're doing to unlock new equipment and things like that.
So far, Side, this all sounds pretty good.
And the PC game is really good. The problem I have is that for the board game, they tried to take everything I've just described and squish it into a board game, which is invariably less complicated than playing it on a PC, because you're trying to simulate it on a physical board. And what it ends up happening is that if you've got 4 people, you might have one person that's responsible for researching new things. You might have one person that's responsible for the soldiers going and attacking the aliens that land on Earth. You might have one person that's responsible for trying to shoot the UFOs out of the sky, and you might have one person that's responsible for kind of coordinating all of that, which again on paper sounds like it would be really good. But what I've found in the couple of times that we've put it on the table and we've played it is that each of those kind of 4 jobs that each one, is assigned to each person is actually not very interesting in a sort of moment to moment gameplay. There's a lot of rolling dice, there's a lot of doing, I'm just going to move this here, and then, I rolled a failure, so that's the end of my turn, and all I did was roll some dice and didn't get the result that the rest of the team needed from me, so now I feel bad.
Am I right in thinking you can play XCOM solo?
You can, but I wouldn't really recommend it, because then you're just doing 4 not very interesting things on your own.
I mean, I've never played it, but you've sold it as something that really isn't worth playing.
I really liked the app nature though.
I was going to say that's the one thing I think that I really do like about the board game is that yes, it's cooperative, but there is a PC app or a phone app that kind of simulates the aliens and what they're doing and where they're landing and where they're attacking and things like that. And that, I suppose, could add an element of replayability in that you are working against this app, and it's also all timed, so you're also working against the time. So it might be like, okay, you're into the research phase, you've got 4 seconds to roll your research rolls and try and research this card or whatever.
I thought that was a really, really fun dynamic where you've got a limited amount of time to take your turn, particularly as well when we consider that you are well known for taking really long turns.
I
really enjoyed the time pressure that was placed upon you and the stress that you could see beads of sweat forming. It was highly satisfying from an outside perspective. All right, yeah, I'm going to tell you about my games. So the game which I found most replayable, again, I did a similar thing to Simon, and I just looked at my Steam history and saw the most number of hours, which I'm sure many of us listening and most of this group will have done as well, and just depressed at how much time you could have saved if you hadn't been interested in games. I'm not going to tell you the figure because it's embarrassing, but most played game was Space Engineers, which interestingly is a game which I haven't played with any other members of this group, but I'm rather hoping it's going to act as a prompt for us to start playing it.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say, Rob, I've never heard of it. What is it?
Never heard of it. Well, I'm about to explain. So the best way to describe it probably is it's Minecraft in space with guns. It's about as sandbox a game as you can get. The base game itself it doesn't have any direction or narrative. You're basically plonked in space and you kind of do what you want, really. It uses a grid system, so you build spaceships and space stations by placing blocks within that grid. And then some of those blocks have sort of special qualities. So they might be a reactor, or they might be a pilot seat, which allows you to pilot your ship, and the reactor allows you to power your ship and that sort of thing. And sort of the limits of what you can design really are kind of completely endless. It really is just a complete sandbox. And the main difference between Space Engineers and Minecraft, beyond it being in space and there being guns in it, obviously, is that there's a robust physics engine. So, in Minecraft, if you play Minecraft, if you cut away all the stone around a block, it just sort of hangs there in space. It doesn't sort of act with gravity, and you can't move it around with gravity. In Space Engineers, that block would fall if gravity's present, or if you're in space, then it would move independently of the rest of the structure. Which means you can have a small fighter ship, for example, flying out of large capital ships, sort of very Battlestar Galactica-esque, all of which you've designed from scratch, and then you can pit your ship against a mate's ship who he's built, and then blow each other's ships apart, and it's just endless fun.
The physics engine's quite a nice addition, I think. I only played Minecraft on a couple of small occasions. I had a brief sort of interlude into it at university. If any of you haven't played Minecraft, you go into a world where everything is a block and you can dig and build and just sort of make things without much purpose, really. I was trying to make a Minecraft version of Helm's Deep from Lord of the Rings because I'm really cool. And one of the things that particularly troubled me, I was attempting to build the drainage ditch that goes in where the Uruk-hai runs in and blows the wall out the outside of the first keep in the films. And to do that, obviously, I needed to run some water into this sort of Helm's Deep area. And to do that, I dug this massive trench all the way down to the sea. I had this small bit of wall, and then I dug this wall away so all the water would flow down, and it didn't. It sort of cut a diagonal line and just stopped because of the lack of physics engine. And after all the effort I'd spent into it, it really put me off Minecraft.
Just to finish sort of with Space Engineers, I feel it's necessary to say it, and I'm very aware that it's going to be quite controversial and people are going to start posting angry things in the comments, but I would go as far as to say that this game is actually better than Minecraft. There you go, I've said it, I'm running for the hills, I'm hiding in a bunker, and on to my least replayable game. So the game I chose to be the least replayable is The Last of Us, which was released on PS3, the original game. I want to start by saying, because I'm very aware that now the people who have started posting an angry comment about my comment on Minecraft have now stopped writing that comment, have now come down to be angry at me about this comment now. I want to start by saying The Last of Us is an absolute masterpiece in every way, and I've chosen it not because I don't want to replay it, but because I don't feel like I need to replay it. So the first game was released by publisher Naughty Dog in 2013, and you play in a post-apocalyptic America, and the reason it's post-apocalyptic is basically a fungus has started changing people into zombies. And if you want any more detail on that, I do strongly recommend you look it up or buy the game. It's fantastic.
That sounds like a good premise. That's very original.
What more do you need to know, hey? So now, particularly the reason I chose this one over any others, because I think there are a lot of games that are a sort of a similar concept, was notably the portrayal of Ellie, who's one of the lead characters. So she's a teenager in the first game, and I think it's fairly rare in a video game in particular to see a female character not portrayed as either sort of a sexual object or incredibly vulnerable. And it was really, really nice to see sort of her character build throughout the game. Now, she does have a father figure who's Joel, who is another one of the lead characters, who does act as a protector, but this is probably a bit of a spoiler actually, so I don't know, turn it off for the next 5 seconds if you don't want to hear this. But there's quite a fairly large part of the game which sees Joel injured and Ellie having to save his life and protect him. So it's nice to sort of see that flip side and to see such a strong and prominent female role. And the reason why I particularly didn't feel this game was necessarily need to be replayed is because I have such cherished memories from my first playthrough that I'm rather concerned that if I go back and play it now, I might undo some of those, and the game might not have aged as well as I would hope it has. The narrative progresses a lot like a film. And I remember actually being less fussed about the actual gameplay than I was about getting to the next cutscene, to see the progress in the story, to see the characters develop. And it became less about a game and almost like a film for me.
That's interesting to hear you say that, because I know that you're one of the people in a normal PC game that when pop-ups come up, you just skip past them without reading them.
I'm really surprised that you've played The Last of Us, to be honest with you. I didn't know that you had. I completely understand why you've put it as least replayable, because it is one of those that I think you're there for the story, like leagues ahead of anything else the game has to offer. I think the story is what you get from it. And I think that in terms of a story in a video game, it's up there probably with the best that's ever been produced.
I think so, yeah.
Oh, high praise. Si, would you play it again? Or are you in agreement with Rob in saying that it doesn't have much replayability because the story is already known after the first time you've played it?
I think that would all depend on how much you enjoyed the gameplay.
For you personally?
I've only played it once, I think the same as Rob. I think I got it when it came out back in 2013. I think I played it non-stop for a week, and then I don't think I've played it since. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's an excellent game. It's kind of a mix of the book The Road by Cormac McCarthy crossed with The Walking Dead. That's how I would describe it.
It's a fairly good description, yeah.
I think you guys are really selling this game, actually. It's really nice because a lot of the things we said we wouldn't replay have been knocked.
Have been negative,
yeah.
Yes.
But this is actually almost too good to replay, because it could never be as good twice. I feel more tempted to go out and buy it now than prior to having heard that.
And I would thoroughly recommend that you do, especially because there is a sequel. Actually, is it being released or has it been released?
It's next week, 19th.
Next week.
It
Yeah,
comes
so
out.
it is being released next week. And that's really exciting as well because it carries on with the same characters. So we see Ellie as a grown-up now and Joel as an older man. And I'm really, really interested to see where they're going to take that narrative.
That sounds good.
Right, should we move on? So this week has seen Sam and Si playing a board game called Twilight Struggle, and myself and Claire playing a computer game called The Settlers. Take it over to you guys first.
So, Twilight Struggle is a two-player game based around spreading global influence during the Cold War, brought out by GMT Games in 2005. It's a card-driven game. It's not dissimilar to Risk in the way that you apply points in countries in order to take control of them. Interestingly, it was the number one board game on Board Game Geek's Top 100 for a fair few years. And it's now at number 9, has won a heap of awards over 15 or so years. It's a staple at the World Board Gaming Championships. It's got a dedicated online version, which is how we've been able to play it over the last couple of weeks. It's played over 10 rounds, and in each round, a player receives a set number of cards with which to place influence around the board, annoy their opponent, score victory points. And when they get to 20 victory points, they win. So Simon, do you want to say some things you thought were good about it? Should we start with the good? Let's start with good.
Yeah, so first of all, I think the theme's really unique. I can't think of many other games that are set in the Cold War. And it's worth pointing out that each of the players, one person is playing as the United States and the other player is playing as the Soviet Union. And the hand of cards that Sam mentioned are actually all related to real historical events that happened throughout the Cold War. And the way that the hands are kind of divided is you have an early war, a mid-war, and a late war, and then the events associated with kind of the early part of the Cold War through to the mid and late part are all kind of in there. It's a really beautiful game to look at in terms of it's quite a satisfying...
Yeah, the board's gorgeous. It's really nice.
Yeah.
That's not the first time you've said that so far this podcast, so... If you were to pit this against Scythe, which one is most beautiful?
Scythe,
yeah.
But mainly because I think the artwork of Scythe appeals to me more in it's slightly fantasy-esque or like kind of steampunk-esque.
It's also more unique. I mean, the Twilight Struggle board is it's well laid out. It's very functional. It looks nice. The colours are nice. It's sort of aesthetically pleasing, but it is still a world map. So you've seen a few of them.
Yeah. I think what I really enjoyed about the game was... There is definitely a high level of tactical play where you're trying to think about not only what you're doing, but also what your opponent's going to do. And you kind of know, at least by each round, based on the cards in your hand, where you can and can't focus. One of the sort of key things is that the scoring is actually one of the cards in your hand. So you might be dealt a card that would allow you to score in Europe, for example, or score in South America. So you can look at that and say, okay, well, how am I going to use the other cards in my hand to maximize the scoring that are going to be in that region? So that might be your part of the plan for that round. But whilst you're playing, you might then notice that actually your opponent is putting a lot of influence into the Middle East. And then you have to start thinking, well, I'm actually not very present in the Middle East, and therefore they're going to score a lot of points. They may have that card. And so there's this kind of push and pull tension where you kind of have a plan for yourself, but you also have to be mindful of what the other person is doing.
Push and pull is quite a good thing to bring up, really.
Yeah.
An interesting feature about this game is the victory point marker, or the victory point record, is a push-pull system, which means that instead of there being a marker for each player, there's one marker and it swings either side of a 0. It's quite fitting, I think, for a game about influence, is that you are effectively trying to do a tug of war with this victory point token to bring it closer to your side of the board.
Yeah, it's key to point out as well that to win the game using the victory points, you need to get 20. And that's not, as Sam said, that's not you just scoring 20 points. That's you scoring 20 more points than your opponent, because every time they score, they pull it back towards them.
So it's like a more extreme version of tennis, where you have to have 2 clear points in order to win a game or a set.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest with you, when I first read that and I thought 20 points, that's going to be extremely difficult. And I think over the course of the games that me and Sam played, I found it very difficult. I would start looking at, okay, I'm going to spend all my points in Europe because I've got the Europe card. And the first game I played, I would try and get as much, control in Europe and as much influence in Europe as I could. But that would then bite you in other areas of the game where you're not spending that influence, and so you ended up kind of netting each other out. And what I really found is that the game really incentivizes you to just eke a few points here and there. Maybe it's you could score 7 points if you completely dominate an area and then play the scoring card, but the kind of risk reward of doing that means that you're going to get punished in a different area. And actually, for me, and the strategy that I tried to employ was actually just trying to keep everything as level as possible, and then when it was advantageous to just tip the scales slightly in my direction and then play the scoring card.
Is it a really long slow death for the player that loses? Because 20 points, just coming in it cold with no experience of it myself, 20 points sounds like a lot. And if you have to look at yourself getting closer and closer to that 20-point mark, it sounds like the losing player would be losing for a long time before the game is over.
It flips around quite considerably. One of the things that I suspect we'll come on to talk about a bit later is the amount of power that the cards in your hand have, and they do allow you to really change the dynamic of a game in a single card play. So I don't think it ever feels like that if you end up losing. I don't think it feels like you've been destined to lose from the start for however long the game lasts.
I could, however, imagine a situation where you play a couple of cards that are reliant on a dice roll, and there are quite a few cards that are reliant, and quite a few moves in the game that you can do which actually require you to roll a dice to produce victory or to reduce influence of the opponent and things like that. And I do feel like you could find yourself in a game where the dice rolls just go against you regardless of your strategy, and that would really scupper you.
Yeah, that's true. Some other good things before we move on to some slightly more critical comments. The online tutorial that comes with the online version of this game. In fact, the online version in general is very good. The online tutorial is excellent. You learn very well very quickly. I thought that was a particularly good feature. Another particularly fun mechanic with this game is that you get the cards. Obviously, there's some cards for the US and there's some cards for the USSR. They're all in the same deck, which means you get dealt your opponent's cards, which is something you don't see in many other games, which is quite fun because it means that you've then got a decision on what you do with that card. So you could just trash it if you're at that point in the game, and the game gives you 3 or 4 other options of what you could do. So you can spend it to gain influence in places, but then the opponent will get to do whatever is written on the card. Or you can commit it to something called a space race, which is sort of I won't go into it, but it's sort of a sideshow game that has different positive effects into the main game.
So Sam, can you explain this to me a bit more? You get to play your opponent's card.
There's lots of things you can do with each card. So each card you can place influence on the board.
Up to the value of that card.
Do whatever action is written on the card. Or you can commit it to this space race, which is the side game I was just describing. And if you get your opponent's card, what you can do is you can play it for influence, but then your opponent will get to do whatever action is written on the card. Or you can commit it to the space race when they won't get to do what action is written on the card, but then you have to roll a dice to get the card into the space race, and you might not be successful with that. And often influence is the main thing, so you'll be thinking about getting influence on the board, but do you want to risk your opponent getting whatever positive thing comes from the action on this card?
I think it's really fun to look at you might get dealt an entire hand of your opponent's cards, and then you have to spend time looking at them and saying, how do I get rid of this card, or how do I play it in such a way that they don't get to minimize the benefit that they get? And I think that does add a nice, well, maybe not nice, it adds a tactical conundrum that you have to grapple with. What I think balances it is that there are some cards that could be played by either side, and so are kind of neutral, and you always know in the back of your mind that your opponent's hand of cards could also be full of event cards and other cards that are for you, and that they will have to deal with as well.
It sounds like it really takes really considered thought on the part of the players. You wouldn't want to play this if you're hungover or something, or tired.
It's interesting, and this might be the point at which we move on to the slightly bad side of things from my perspective, is that it's sold as this highly tactical game, and I would argue that it, for the most part, is quite luck driven. And I think that you're right, playing it hungover might not be to your advantage, because you might miss an opportunity here and there. But there's so much luck built into this game that I'm not actually sure that tactics are as big an influence as the opinion of this game might lead you to believe.
Oh, okay.
Are there any games where playing it hungover would be an advantage?
I don't think anywhere would be an advantage, but I think some where it would really get in the way of gameplay, and there'd be some others where you could get away with it.
Yeah, probably right.
Yeah, I was just thinking like playing Twilight Imperium hungover means I might be able to nap through some of it, which would be a definite bonus.
You take that back.
Oh, I'm baiting him.
I think going back to Sam's point, I think it is... I can see a path to where this game can be played at an extremely high level, where you look at the cards you've been dealt, you can anticipate the cards that your opponent might play, and you can understand what cards have and haven't been discarded, and then you can use that to sort of say, well, based on this, I think that he's going to play or she's going to play this event card, and so I should try and set myself up. You can try and play around each other. I think the biggest problem with that is that to get to that level of intimate knowledge of the game, I don't know how many games you would have to play, and I don't think I would enjoy playing that many games getting there.
No.
Would you, in fact, classify this as a game that has limited replayability?
Yes, but not because the game leads it to limited replayability, just because I don't want to play it again.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that we're obviously discussing this quite a lot when we've been playing the game. At which I will note that most of the time we were playing it was in long stretches of silence while we both just thought about what we were going to do. It certainly wasn't a game that me and Sam were having, a bit of a laugh and a banter about whilst we were playing it. It was just, I could do, no, I'm not gonna. It was a lot of that, which I'm sure you can all imagine playing against me would be really fun.
Sam, I'm so sorry, mate. Could you get to the point where you could feel your hair grow?
It brings me on to an interesting point, actually. Well, this game, especially the online version, has a chess-like timer that records how long you've been playing for. And it's very chess-like in the way that it records how long each individual player has taken on their turn, which has allowed me to quantify something that we probably always wanted to know. That question being, how long does Simon really take to make his move in a board game?
Because he does
Amazing.
have a reputation for being a bit slow.
Does indeed.
Being a bit slow is an understatement.
Simon at one point did ask me if how long we've been playing, and I had to sort of quite cagely say, "Oh no, I've not a clue." Well, Simon, I was lying to you. I have it written down. So I can tell you that across our 2 games, which in Simon's defence were quite long, but across 2 games, Simon took almost exactly 3/4 of an hour longer than me to take his moves. Now, I should say a little bit in Simon's defence that he did win both the games we played. That is something I can't take away from him. But 3/4 of an hour, good jeez.
Don't defend him.
Sam, do you think the outcome might have been different if you'd taken that long thinking about your moves?
No, not really. I don't think so.
Well, the side's already made up what movie he's going to make. Like immediately, he knows what he's going to do. He just enjoys that everyone's looking at him. The attention's all on him. Timer's clicking down. We're all starting to feel our hair grow.
Do you think it's the mental game he's playing? Simon, do you not want to respond to that massive sense?
I mean, I can't argue facts. I will point out that I did win both games, quite, including one game. And let me just, I can't get the Steam achievement up now, but it was a 1% achievement because I won with 20 victory points while Sam dominated 4 out of the 5 regions of the world.
Bringing me on to the problems with this game. There are so many. But on the point that Simon's just made, so Simon got an achievement there for winning the game despite having control of almost none of the world. Somehow still managed to win, which doesn't make any sense to me at all, to be quite honest. But there we go. That might just show my ineptitude at this game.
Yeah, how did that happen? How did that work?
Okay, so some other bad points about this game. So I said earlier it's sold as a tactical game, and I'm not sure how much I agree with that. I think it probably is tactical, as Simon said, if you played a lot of it and you can predict the cards that are likely to be in your opponent's hand, but not for the first few games.
Not for the first 10 games, I wouldn't even.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, yeah. Well, for a game described as being tactical, it's hugely luck-driven. Our first game, for example, ended on a die roll, it's just a bit of a letdown way to end a game, which is you expect it to be really tactical.
Could have just flipped a coin right at the beginning.
As the time was passing when you were playing it, did you enjoy it or was it painful? Are you saying I could have been playing something more fun? Or are you saying I wasn't even having fun when I was playing it?
I would say there were fun moments in it, but for the most part, I wouldn't have said that the however many hour chunk it was that we played it, I wouldn't say that was 100% fun. I'd say maybe 20%.
Okay, fair enough.
One thing that's a bit strange about this game is you can't really have a game plan. Like most tactical games, you'll have a plan of what you're going to do. Whereas in this,
is it even a tactical game if you can't have a game plan?
Well, this is what I find strange about it. So if you try and have a game plan, there's 3 reasons why it just won't really work. So the game's split into up to 10 rounds, which are completely separate. You get a completely new deck, give or take 1 card for each round. So you can't plan into the next round because you just don't know what your cards you're going to get. The cards that you get are so powerful that even if you do come up with a plan at the start of a particular round, your opponent will almost certainly ruin whatever plan that is with one of their massively overpowered cards. And there's nothing you can do to stop them. It just happens. And the only way of scoring, as we said, is these scoring cards. I thought I liked that feature at the start of the game. I thought that's really interesting. You can pick when best to score and do that. And in some ways, that is quite a fun feature. But in our second game, I didn't get dealt one for 5 solid rounds, which meant that I couldn't score any points. And the problem with that is that you then spend all that time. I spent my time watching what Simon was doing and thinking, oh, he's placing influence there, so I probably need to get some influence in that area so that when he scores it, I don't lose as much, or maybe I can break even if I'm lucky. But there's nothing I can really do to make any meaningful amount of points, which means if you get, 5 rounds is half the game, more than half the game in some games, and you can't get any points throughout it.
I do think it's challenging if you don't have a scoring card, you are kind of left at a bit of a loss, and you just kind of look at your hand and go, well, let's kind of see what I can do with this. But there's no strategy that you can build with any direction outside of trying to anticipate what the other person's doing, who also, and I'm pretty sure this happened in some of the games we played, don't have a scoring card in their hand either. Yeah. And so you end up kind of passing, you're spreading your influence around without any real plan or any real long-term goal, which I think is quite frustrating.
The only other couple of little things I would add on this game is it's quite long. For a 2-player game, it takes a while. I think our combined 2 games was in excess of 4 hours. It's quite a long game for 2 players. You've got to both be quite committed to it, I think.
Is that because you were playing against Simon, though?
Well, there is a bit of that, I suppose, but I don't think it would have been a massive amount.
It would have been a 20-minute game if he weren't playing.
I don't think this is a game that you could set up on a Thursday evening and play a round of.
No, but in its defence, because there isn't any game plan, or you can't have a game plan in it, you could happily stop halfway through, go to work the next day and come back to it, because you're not going to forget what your game plan was because you haven't got one. So it does have the ability to go away and come back to, which is quite a good thing. So to bring this to a close, it's currently at £67.22 on Amazon, or it was at the time of recording at least. So to give us some sort of clarity, would I buy this game instead of circa 15 pints? And the answer is no. Definitely. Absolutely not.
So there you have it, Twilight Struggle. Don't buy it if you think you could have more fun with 15 pints. Myself and Claire have been looking at The Settlers 3. Now Claire, I'm going to let you describe this one.
Yeah. To explain Settlers, I need to tell you a story, and it involves Jupiter, god of the Romans, Horus, god of the Egyptians, and Chi-Yu, god of the Asians. And they're all summoned by a greater god and told that their lazy ways are extremely subpar. So Jupiter is called out for being too fat, and Horus is told he's not making pyramids like he used to. And they must all pit their champions against each other, and the 2 losing gods will be punished by being made to paint the night sky a refreshing shade of white, which is an outrageous punishment for that. The nature of the champions competition is pretty important to you, as the gameplay adopts the role of the champion. So you must lead your race to settle an island, build up a town, and ultimately wipe out the races of the other teams. Games typically start with a group of settlers on the map, a couple of resources, and then you take it from there, building up your town. So far, I've made it sound like soldiers will be the order of the day. However, this is actually easier said than done because the game revolves around a complex system of supply chain management. So if you want a soldier, then you must ensure that you build a woodcutter to cut wood, a sawmill to chop it, so you can build a mine to mine iron ore and another mine to get coal. Then your little men will automatically carry the resources to the iron ore smelter, and then another little chap will come and take the iron ore to the weaponsmith. And once this has been processed, someone will take your weapon to the barracks and turn himself into a soldier. And once you've completed all of this, you'll probably notice that your mines aren't producing as many resources as you'd like. So you start the process of setting up a food industry to support them. If this sounds complicated, it is, despite the fact that I've simplified it. But it's also extremely satisfying.
I think that's an excellent introduction into the game. Yeah, I could not agree more that it's interesting that this game has been criticised for having too much focus on sort of the military aspect. I really disagree with that, because in order to actually get my military to do anything whatsoever, not only did I have to invest quite a lot of time into the economy and getting the economy up and running, I also had to learn how that economy worked. So I'd say probably 80% of the game was trying to figure out how I can not only just create the weapon for the soldier to use, but how I can create the tool for the man to build the building, which needs to build the weapon for the soldier to use. And for me, I thought for a game that was released in 1998, that was a steep learning curve.
I think it doesn't really make it easy for you to learn about it either. It has a tutorial, which Rob didn't play.
Yeah, that could be very well where I fell down.
It could be, but actually it isn't. The tutorial teaches you about 70% of what you need to know, and then lets you take it from there. So you have absolutely no idea how to build ships and how they work. So I found that on campaign number 2, I had to Google it and read some forums on settlers to find out how to use trading ships, which turned out to be incredibly useful and absolutely fundamental. But it is rather a self-taught process.
Is there satisfaction in that process, Claire?
It is so pleasing. When you get it, you've built your water mill to get the water, and that helps a grain farm grow grains, and then you've got a grain mill to mill the grain, and then a bakery, and it takes the bread to the coal mine, and everything works, and loads of soldiers come out the other end. It is very satisfying, it's very pleasing. But conversely, when it isn't working, it makes you so annoyed.
Yeah, I'd say I had a fairly negative experience of the game when we first played it, and now I don't necessarily think this is a criticism of the game, but more a criticism of the operator, because as you quite rightly say, Claire, I didn't do the tutorial, thinking this is a game made in 1997, there can't be all that many complicated mechanics to it, I'll just crack in and then see how I'd go on. Really, really foolish decision. But yeah, I was sat there, again, it was scenario 2, and just to sort of slightly describe it, basically, you've got one island where a lot of your you've got an economic powerhouse where you produce a lot of stuff, but you've got another island which is sort of your military foothold, so you don't have as many resources.
And the win condition for the game as well is that little island has to survive, otherwise you lose. And all your fights take place there because you share that island with the bad guys.
Exactly right, yeah. And I built way too many lumberjacks and basically decimated all the forests in the region, not realising that you should have built a forester, which replaces the trees that you cut down. So what I had was everything in that supply chain all perfectly set up, except for that one little element, which is Claire quite well rightly described it as that little niche in your supply chain, and you end up just with hundreds of blokes who should be doing something just stood there doing absolutely nothing, and you cannot figure out why. It's absolutely infuriating.
Rob was very quickly absolutely furious at the game.
Yeah. I don't know, if there's someone out there who knows this game more and is sat there just shaking their head saying, what the hell is this guy talking about? Please get in contact, because I would love to know how to be better at it.
It sounds like there's a lot of comparison in areas between this and Age of Empires, in that it's sort of a game about settling and then expanding and then going on a sort of a militaristic.
It's similar, but Age of Empires is just nothing in terms of supply chain. It's just incomparable, because the Settlers game, I'd say 80% of winning, maybe more, is in managing your supply chain. And Age of Empires, as long as you get the 4 basic resources in ample supply, you're fine, and you don't need to worry about it after.
Does that make it more fun than Age of Empires?
No.
It makes it different, for sure.
I mean, yeah, it makes it different, yeah. No, I'd say that a better comparison, Sam, might be to Stronghold and the Stronghold games, where, again, if you haven't played them, they are very similar, but you've got to build a castle. And there's that similar nature of that supply chain, where in order to produce an archer, you've got to produce a guy to cut some wood, produce a guy to make a bow, get that bow over to the barracks, who then makes a soldier. So I'd say it's more similar to Stronghold than Age of Empires. But it does also have some fairly unique game mechanics, particularly where you sort of squabble over territory. The way that you sort of advance is you take over your enemies' towers, and if you take over their towers, then it sort of carves that little bit of territory out for you now, and any buildings of theirs that are in that territory get destroyed. Which means, actually, if you have a badly placed tower and they capture that tower, then you can lose an enormous amount of your economy very, very quickly.
That is very upsetting as well, because if they capture your tower, the territory becomes theirs, and all of your buildings that were in that area disappear in a little puff of smoke.
Very, very frustrating. I suppose, actually, I feel I have been quite critical of this game, so perhaps let's look at some of the pros, because there were a lot of pros.
Yeah, I agree. The little men, for example, are absolutely charming. They tootle around, they pick up things. When your geologists find a mineral, they shout yippee, which is absolutely lovely. It has a lot of charm.
It's charm that I think comes with really getting to know the game and getting into the game, because I felt personally that the pixel art, bearing in mind that this game was released a similar time to Age of Empires, that the pixel art is nothing on Age of Empires. I think pixel art on Age of Empires is considerably better. But I do think once you really get into the game, it's got quirks just like that, which make it incredibly lovable. And I wonder whether or not my initial dislike of the game really stemmed more from me being a product of my generation and just having a really, really short attention span. And I suppose when I think back to when I got the first Age of Empires game, when I got the first Stronghold games, I remember when you bought the disc, you got a little user manual in there. And this user manual is not user manual that you'd be used to nowadays. It was a book, and you could look through this in an immense amount of details. It tells you everything you can build in the game. It tells you sort of what the troops can do in the game. And I think nowadays we're so expectant to be able to just drop into a game. The tutorial teaches you everything you need to know, and then you can just get on with the game without any particular effort. Gone are the days, I think, when you play a game constantly for months just to learn new stuff about the game. And part of the wonders of that game is actually you don't know everything about it, and there's still more stuff to learn. And I didn't know it did that. Oh, that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think that could be nice. The issue with Settlers as well is that it does have a number of glitches, and you learn about how to get around them. So, for example, when I first started to launch the game, I couldn't. And I had to go on a support forum and find out that in order to launch the game, I had just had to right-click it on my desktop and click Launch as an Administrator. When I was little and I had this game, the glitch, it launched fine, but the glitch was significantly worse, and I couldn't build soldiers. And it's a testament to how much fun the game is actually, that despite the fact that I couldn't build soldiers, I still kept trying and I still kept coming back to it. You'll be glad to hear that is well and truly fixed. But in the first campaign, I had an issue where no matter how many swords I built, the swords were taken to the barracks, and people kept coming out of the barracks with a bow and arrow as a bowman. But what I wanted was only swordsman, because I couldn't really work out at the time what the point of bowman was. And it actually only affected campaign number 1. After that, I got only swordsman, and being deprived of the other types of soldiers prompted me to go and build them on purpose. But I think it does have a couple of quirks.
Definitely. And I suppose just to point out some of the others, things like we couldn't get multiplayer working no matter what we tried, which I think was a real shame. So we had to play separate single player campaigns. And also you can't adjust the music volume, which I get when this game was first released. Probably chatting to a mate over Discord or a Steam account or something just wouldn't have existed. So I understand that they wouldn't have factored that in. But in order to hear Claire while we played, I had to go into the game files, and rename the music file so that it couldn't find that music file when it booted up. And I just think that's a little bit too involved.
Brilliant. No, I think that's a pro.
Excellent. Should we be assuming that these problems have been addressed in later versions of Settlers 3? Isn't the last of them? There's been 4 since, I think.
I believe that we are awaiting Settlers 8, and that is due to come out within the next year. Another way in which it's kind of a bit dated is that they only feature male characters, all of whom are white. And awkwardly, the 3 races that you can play as are Roman, Egyptian, and Asian. And as a trio, that's a bit like grouping Manchester, Birmingham, and Jupiter. There just isn't 3 of the same thing. So this could be seen as silly at best or racist at worst. Embarrassingly for the series, it took them until their 6th edition in 2007 to invent women.
There you go.
So that's a big black mark.
Especially with there's a lot of connotations around colonialism and that's something that maybe they'll fix in 8. I would hope.
They cleverly got around the colonial aspect by making it a fantasy, set in a fantasy world with fantasy races in the future, which I think is better than giving it a colonial feel set in the Earth, because that's too relatable, a bit too raw.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So I can't tell. Would you recommend this game?
100%.
Yeah. The price when I bought it was, can't remember exactly now, but it was around about £4. You think for less than a pint of beer, 100% worth downloading.
I am definitely not the sort of person that lets computer games like take over their life and lets loads of hours go towards it. But in the last
I don't know who you're referring to, Claire.
I couldn't possibly say. In the last 2 weeks, I have spent a regrettable amount of time playing Settlers. It's been so addictive, and I've got up for work the next day wishing that I'd been strong enough to go to bed earlier and just have an early night. But I haven't been able to because it's been so absorbing. I've really enjoyed it, and I definitely recommend it to you all.
I mean, that's high praise, that is.
So that concludes the second episode of Tiny Table Talks. If you'd like to get in touch about anything we've said today, or perhaps request future topics for discussion, or to offer up your thoughts in a game that you think has no replayability, you can tweet us at tinytablepod, or you can email thetinytables@gmail.com. We will return in a fortnight with our first Eurogame review, along with a prehistoric survival game. We'll continue to make further unhelpful observations on the size of my table.